Alright, you know the drill at this point. I crashed this car and we're now turning it into this. Let's get back to it.
Alright, so first thing I wanted to get to when I got back to this car this week was the wiring harness. With the cage going in, I wanted to pin a lot of this out of the way and get it set in place. One, so I didn't have to worry about it later when the cage was in and I could just do the last of the buttoning up. And then secondly, because I wanted to make sure that nothing was in the way when we put that cage in. The wiring harness was all over the place. If you've ever messed around with a wiring harness, either splicing it, replacing it, swapping one out, you know that it's an insane nest of wires, and when you go to put it in, it ends up all over the place. So it's a lot of organizing and cable management and tying things down. So I wanted to get a lot of that organized and clean just to make the process coming next a little bit easier. Because once that cage was in, it was going to be time for the dash, hooking up all of the electrical systems, and that is a huge process. So I wanted to give myself a nice good head start so that when it came time, I could just start plugging things in and get straight to it. Okay, so it's engine time for the Miata here. Things are going pretty well, going pretty quickly, so I'm going to throw that in next. Wasn't expecting to get to it this early, but the build's going pretty well so far. Things are going pretty smoothly, so we're going to throw that in while we got the chance. Should be pretty quick and easy. Gonna get some help from Adam on that just to make sure I do it all correctly, since this is going to be my first time personally installing a fresh engine. I pulled the other one out of the old car when that one crashed, but obviously a little bit different when you're pulling things apart. You can just kind of take bolts off and throw it out of there and don't have to worry about it too much, but there is a proper procedure to putting one back in. So we're gonna hop onto that. We'll get to the drivetrain after that, see how it goes. First thing Adam and I did before we even began installing the engine was clean it off. Really key process of this whole thing is making sure everything is clean before you put it in. For the most part, with a lot of the parts you're putting in, especially the engine, these are things that you're never gonna have as ease of access to as you are right now when you're putting them in. So cleaning off the backside, the underside, the inside, every angle of something that you have access to before you lose access to it for the foreseeable future. After that, we started dropping it into the engine bay. It was a little bit of playing around just to get both sides of the engine braces to line up to drop those studs in. We eventually got it in though, strapped it down, stopped it falling forward since the transmission wasn't there to hold it. After that, went under the car to tighten down the engine braces to make sure that the engine was good and secure under there. From there, that meant the engine was fully in place and good to go, and I can move on to the really complicated part, figuring out where every single wire goes. Back at the top of the engine, it was time to start plugging things back in. Luckily, I had Adam with me again to give me some very much needed guiding wisdom. One of the other things that was super easy about this is that when Kaylin and I took this engine out of the car, we labeled every single connector that was in use on this. So as I was plugging it in, all I had to do was look at the green tape saying where it goes, click it into place. On top of that, when you lay out the wiring harness, there's usually only one spot that each wire can reach. Makes your life super easy because you're very limited for choice at that point. You just plug it in wherever it can fit. And then from one connector to another, for the most part, when they're all in the same area, the connectors will all be different shapes or sizes. So even if you try to plug it in the wrong place, there's definitely only one spot it's going to fit. So very foolproof. Okay, so engine's in, running pretty smoothly. Been working on buttoning everything up there. Got some of the wiring harness connected. A few things still left unconnected because waiting on a few more things to go on. Still need to hook up the mass airflow sensor once I get the airbox on. And haven't done any of the accessory components yet. Still gotta put the rad in, still gotta put the alternator, starter, that kind of stuff. But I'm gonna wait on transmission and that kind of thing so I can work my way forward so I don't block myself from able to put the starter, then the alternator, then I'll do rad and all that. But it's going pretty well so far. So we're gonna throw in the transmission, get the drivetrain sorted, and probably do the exhaust after that. It's going very smoothly so far, so going to take advantage of this good workflow and just try and get as much done as possible. See if we can get the underside of this car fully put together, get the drivetrain fully in. Definitely not going to be starting it anytime soon. Need to finish all the wiring inside and waiting on the drop floor and the cage to be finished so I can finalize that, because until the cage is done, can't put the dash back in, and until the dash is back in, can't finish all the wiring. It'll at least be a good stage to have this done. So then once I'm done with the inside, just ready to fire right up. Obviously, I'll need to do fluids, consumables, swap all that over, but it's going pretty well so far. I'll give you a quick update though, but everything else that's gone on so far in case you've missed it. Right now we got suspension completely done around the entire car. The front need to swap out the brakes still. It's still got the ones that came on the car. Just need to source new front calipers since I pretty heavily damaged the front left in the crash. Don't want to reuse that caliper. We may reuse the front right, but sometimes a good rule of thumb is if you're swapping one side, you swap both, just so they're even. But we'll see about that. At least you need to get a fresh caliper for the front left. So you need to take the wheels back off, swap those over, but that shouldn't be a problem. I'll do that all when we get fresh rotors and pads. But the rear is pretty much done. Brakes are all on there from the old car. Just need to do rotors and pads back there, but suspension is all in. Went pretty well. Turns out when I was taking this car apart, the suspension all had rubber bushings in it. I was under the impression that I had polyurethane because when we're building these cars, we want polyurethane bushings. It just limits the areas of compression to where you can control them. And so that was an interesting discovery about the old car. So that means this one will be another little upgrade for us, which is pretty sweet to see. So excited to see how that's going to feel when we finally get this car back out on track and see if maybe we can get some faster lap times out of this than we did out of the old car. So that's pretty good. But lots of little stuff being done too. Got tow hooks on the front and back. Got the wiring harness pretty much laid out. Inside we've got the drop floor pretty much done, which is pretty good. The bottom plate just needs to be tacked into place, but left that exposed for the time being, just in case we need an access hatch when we're fiddling around in the car. But that should be able to get tacked in pretty much any time. But we're ready to probably mount the seat soon, but we're gonna wait until the cage goes in, just so that we have a good idea of what kind of space we have for a halo or any sort of headspace with a seat in the car. So we'll decide what seat goes in, probably gonna be a Kirky, maybe use some sort of a car bucket seat. We'll have to see. It's we got lots of choice about what we can throw in there. Probably gonna do sliders though, compared to the last car, which was just hard mounted to the ground. And so makes it a little bit more adjustable since this is gonna be a rental car for a variety of different clients. We want to make sure it's as versatile as possible for anybody but will drive it. We'll see about that.
Next, Paul came by and we tried to put the cage in, and it did not go as well as we'd hoped. As you can see here, tried to just drop it into the car, and there was so much stuff in the way that blocked us from doing that. We'd hoped with limited modifications we'd be able to get in place, but what came next was about 7 or 8 hours of trying to slip it in. Oh, that doesn't fit. Cutting, pulling it out. Oh, that doesn't fit. Cutting, pulling it out. That doesn't fit. Cutting, pulling it out. So you'll have to excuse me the fact that I skipped a lot of steps until we're here, where this cage is in place. Nothing's welded down here. This is just the cage dropped into the car. We test fitted the hardtop to see if it works. We were just so happy this thing fit in there. But with that in place, Paul could get onto the fabrication work, start putting the mounting plates in, get all the fabrication and welding stuff sorted, and I could move on to the transmission. So just like with the engine, first thing I wanted to do was clean it off. The transmission had been building up dirt in the other car for years, never being able to be cleaned, because accessing one when it's underneath the car is quite difficult and would be pretty annoying to have to clean while it's under there. So I took full advantage of this access to do a nice deep clean, get this thing looking pristine and new before throwing it back into the car. You can see here what it looked like before I started cleaning. Looks pretty black, pretty caked, not so great. And then here, after the fact, looks like a completely different transmission. So it's these minor details when you're putting together a build that really make the difference. Once the transmission was clean, it was time to put it into the car. This was another area that I leaned very heavily on Adam's experience to help guide me through it. Got it up on the jack, started throwing it in there.
All right, so one thing I've been doing throughout this process that I've sort of showed off here and there is making sure that every part we put back on this car is pristine and clean and good to go. And so one step of that process is every nut and bolt that goes back on this car, you want to make sure that you've cleaned off any rust, any grease, any residue, anything like that, so that you're not binding anything when you tighten it back down, and you're not risking anything getting corroded and spreading that corrosion onto this freshly built car. And so for bolts like this, we'll take them to our wire wheel here. We'll clean them all off, make sure they're nice and
pristine. We'll put some anti-seize on them when we go to tighten everything down, just so nothing gets stuck in place, because a lot of the stuff when it came off the car, because it had been sitting on a car for 5 to 10 years or something along those lines, some of them can seize in place. And so you want to make sure that this car, for the next 5 to 10 years, as long as it then lives on, a lot of these bolts are never going to come back off in that time frame. And so you want to make sure that if you do need to take them back off at a later date, they'll come off nice and easy. And so making sure everything you put back on this car is clean and pristine, even things like drive shaft, the mating side of the bell housing, you want to clean all of that off, make sure it's smooth and clean, so you have nice flush mating surfaces, nice clean mating surfaces, so you get no leaks, you get no binds, anything like that. It's a very important part of the build process that not only elevates the quality of the build that you're putting together, but makes your life easier much further down the line. Because for now, I may be loosening and tightening things here and there, and it's not a big deal, but take this car out in the rain a few times, maybe you get a bit of corrosion on the car, you go to take off the drive shaft, maybe these drive shaft bolts have seized, and then you're kind of screwed. Either you got to cut these off and find new ones, or you need to damage the drive shaft to get that off, or maybe you need to damage a suspension component. And so making sure every piece that you put back on this car is clean is a very important part of the step. So that's what we're doing now. I'm going to clean these off before I put the drive shaft on. And then after that, that should be the drivetrain fully installed, which is going to be a great little step. And so every little piece of this step is very, very important. So heading on to that now.
With all those nuts and bolts nice and clean and the transmission in place, it was time to start installing the ladder brace and the drive shaft, getting every last little bit of this drivetrain into the car.
All right, transmission's in, ladder brace is in, that's all connected to the diff and bolted into the transmission here. I'm gonna do the drive shaft in a sec here, as well as the downpipe for the exhaust. Things are going really well down here. Things are coming along very nicely. Almost have this full drivetrain installed, which is pretty exciting. It's a nice step to make. So that means this car is one step closer to cranking over and running again and breathing back to life. So excited about that. Also gone through everything we have so far. This bin here is all the stuff that still needs to go in the car, and it is an ever decreasing pile of stuff compared to this rack here, which is all stuff that's probably gonna be going back into inventory. It's a good variety of things. We got pedal box out of the old car. We've got some of the stuff that came with this car, alternator, air filter, dash cluster, clutch, coil pack, that kind of stuff, as well as Yonaka shocks, a full NB1 wiring harness, bunch of control arms, so lots of really good handy spares to have for us, and as well, all kinds of extra pieces that we're probably not going to hold on to, that I'm going to sell off, because for spec Miata, you don't need door cards, you don't need center console, you don't need a soft top, so that stuff is of no use to us, so we'll pass that on. It's coming along pretty well. Less and less stuff left to go on this car, and in no time this thing will be driving again. Pretty much going to have this thing running in 2 weeks time. That's when we're going to want to do the shakedown ahead of our test and tune, since we got a client that's going to be running this car in the test and tune, and you never want to be putting a client in an untested car, partially because things could go wrong and you don't want to be risking a client in that case, but then also because that's somebody that's paying to get the most out of their track time in a car like this, and you want to work out all the kinks in advance of them getting in so they can make the most of that of their time in the car. So I'm excited to get to do the shakedown on this thing. It'll be pretty cool. I'm gonna do that in a couple weeks time, but for now, back onto the drivetrain. All right, drive shaft on. Still got to torque it down, double check the spec. Should be about 30 foot-pounds. And then that is in place. And that's technically the last of the drivetrain. That's been pretty cool. So I'll torque that down and we'll get on to the downpipe.
With the drivetrain installed, I moved the car over to one of our 2-post bays to make the rest of the process easier, since I'm going to be jumping all over the place to finish this build. Right now I am putting the starter in, putting the alternator in, putting the engine brace in, and then I'm hooking up some of those final few wires before I can put the dash in. While I was also working in the engine bay, I discovered that the bracket for the throttle cable somehow wasn't with the engine anymore, so I had to fabricate something new to go on there. Ended up taking some scrap metal, cutting that down, making a little brace for it, cleaning it all up, and then throwing that in the engine, and it works just as good. So pretty pleased with my nice little fabrication work to match up with Paul's very large job of welding the cage and the drop floor in. So in case you're wondering, I am definitely a co-fabricator on this car now. Also put on the plastic on a tray to fully protect the underside of this car. Okay, so we've been pretty busy on this Miata the last little bit, done a bunch of stuff off camera, trying to get through some of our to-do list. The big one here is our cage is now welded in. We're missing the down stems back here, but that we'll be able to add later on. We wanted to first off just get the main section of the cage installed, but that's all tacked in, painted up, all 4 corners, welded in properly. We've painted the window net brackets here, just so you don't bang your head off them, because that does happen a lot and it does hurt. But that's in, so that's a really significant step for us. Now that that's in, it means that I'll be able to start putting the dash back in place and finish up all the wiring and make really significant progress on that part. Other than that though, we've already seen that we got the engine in, which it's in now. I've done fluids for the diff and the transmission. So aside from the engine, the rest of the drivetrain is fully taken care of. It's all mounted in properly, fluids are all in, so that's good to go. No oil in the engine right now because we're waiting on a new shipment of oil so I can top that up. Same thing for coolant. No coolant because the coolant pipe here has a couple ports for water temp gauges that go to a analog water temp gauge in the car, as well as the aim system. Same here for oil pressure. Got a line going out for that. So I need to be able to hook up the aim system and hook up all of our gauges before I can pump fluid into the rad. Otherwise it's just gonna pour out everywhere. So waiting on that, but airbox is in, all of the accessories are in. Got alternator in, starter in, whole fuel lines, evap systems hooked up, brake system is connected. I've done front right caliper, I've already swapped that out, same with the lines. I still need to do the front left brake just because we're waiting on a replacement caliper, since that's the side that had the impact. That shouldn't take too long. So I've also done some small stuff like the arrow catches here so we can close the hoods. Doors have been done for a while, but I shave a little bit more off in order to get it to close around the cage now that it was in its final place. The cage itself was definitely quite an adventure. We had to cut some of the welds off to be able to bend the cage to get it back in, so that before we could then weld it back together. Had to cut a lot of this car out. The one downside of the old car having to be cut apart to get this out is that we couldn't exactly see how it went in the first place. There's a lot of sections that have been a bit mangled in the process of taking the cage out that ended up being quite critical in order to get the clearance that we needed for this cage. But we figured it out, and that is in, and we never have to worry about that again. Back here in the trunk, got the fuel regulator, got the rain light put on. Gonna be able to run that wiring out there. Still need to pin up the whole harness back here. I was waiting on the cage to be in before I routed that all back to the trunk. All of it's in place, but none of it's pinned down. Also got some stuff like our mesh grill here for the rad, just to block chip rocks from going in. Same with the under tray. That's all in there now. Got tow hooks in. It's all coming along pretty well. A few more things to come next. It's going to be the dash. probably after this, pin up all that wiring. That's going to be the most significant step. But take a look here at our to-do list. It is definitely not everything that needs to be done, as you might be able to see if you can read my horrible handwriting, that I've filled in every single little gap as more and more things come up that I realize that we need to do. But I've already got stuff done like fuel regulator, starter, engine brace, alternator, got the belt on, got this bracket made for the throttle body, or for the throttle cable, since we're missing the one that came off that. Quite a few other things left to do. Got to do coolant, calipers, dash, fuel filter, aim system. Lots of stuff to get done. But in theory, once this list is done, the car's done. So we'll see how that goes. Now that Paul had finished the cage, I was able to reinstall the dash and get finished up on all that wiring. This was a step I was really excited for because it's quite a meaningful step in the build process, and a lot of things are being held back until that can be finished. So with the dash in place, I started trying to connect up a bunch of wires. I had to hook up the panel in the center console to be able to do our lights, our master, our ignition, everything really key in order to get this car fired up. There was a lot of loose wires to pin back and figure out what they go. But just like with the engine harness, like I had said before, everything had been labeled about where it goes. So that made things a little bit easier and made my life quite simple when it came to putting this thing together. With the dash and all the wiring in place, it meant that I can go back to the engine bay and I could start hooking up all of our digital and analog gauges. Both our oil pressure and our water temp are monitored through our aim system and 2 analog gauges on the dash. So because I didn't have the dash in, I wasn't able to plug those in just yet. But now that that's in place, I was able to run those wires through and hook them up in the engine bay. Another thing being held back in this chain reaction was because I hadn't hooked up the water temp sensors, I couldn't fill the radiator with coolant. The radiator hose had 2 big open holes for the water temp gauges, so now that those were plugged in, I could fill up that with coolant.
Alright, what's going on with this master switch? How the fuck to do that?
Okay, so we've made significant progress on this Miata now. Full drivetrain is in, all fluids are in. We did briefly crank it over. I didn't get a video of that, unfortunately, but Adam fired in some brake clean while I cranked it, and it started up for a brief 2 seconds, but this car is now officially alive. Last 2 things that need to get done is Paul's gonna be back tomorrow, do these downpipes and weld in the plates we need for the seat. That'll finish off all of the welding, which means I can start finalizing a lot of the stuff in the car. I can put the roof back on. I can fill it up with fuel because I don't want fuel fumes leaking into the trunk while he's welding in there. So a couple things being held up until that's done. But once that's out of the way, can move right back on. All of the wiring is in. I don't know if I explicitly mentioned that, but I assume you would understand based off the fact that this thing fires. But I got it all right first try, so pretty proud of that. You can see here. See that? There's a functioning aim system. We had a couple flashing lights. One less flashing light than normal. So I'm assuming that is the water pressure or water temp. Oh no, there you go. There's both lights. Okay. So we got a couple lights to figure out on there, but we got stuff like
Rain light working. So that's pretty cool. Shut that off. Wipers work. You can't really see that because there's no wipers on, but the little motors are moving. Lights aren't hooked up right now, so can't check those out, but if I had to hazard a guess, I'd say those work. But it's looking pretty good. I got a set of anti-storms on this so that I can test the car out. These are just a set of boobies we got lying around. I'll show you the to-do list, all I got left. I'm still waiting on some parts. I still need new belts for the car. Those have been ordered. I need a shifter boot because the inside turret boot has been torn and the outside one was torn as well. So I need a new one of those before I put it on, just because you don't want a bunch of dirt getting in the transmission. And even this boot, when we took this transmission apart, there was dirt on the shifter. So just want to make sure that's clean. What else do we need? I need pads and rotors. Oh yeah, that's it. Other than that, I need pads and rotors, all four corners. Right now it's got the pads and rotors that came with the car that are super worn and rusted. So I don't want to be driving on those. Plus the brake fluid and the clutch fluid is super dead because I changed all four calipers and a bunch of fluid leaked out while I was doing that. So pedal's dead right now. So I'll need to do brake flush, top up all fluids at the same time that I am swapping out the pads and rotors. I'll also do a full brake service because right now I just threw the calipers on in the existing condition that they are. I didn't grease anything up. I didn't clean anything off just because I figured I needed to take it apart again later anyway. So there's no point in doing half a brake service right now and then leaving it for later. So I'll get all of that sorted out. But let's take a look at our to-do list here. Got pads and rotors. I need to torque the rear axles. A lot of stuff checked off here. I gotta add something to the list to check out that aim system. Need to adjust the timing because before this car was crashed, the timing was definitely out. Need to put the seats and belts in. Need to do safety stickers. I already got stuff like this that was on the dash from the old car, but I need some for the outside just to mark where power is and where the tow hooks are and stuff like that. Need to do shifter boot. Need to finish the cage. That's Paul's doing that. Need to put the windshield back in. Unfortunately, literally just 30 seconds ago, cracked the windshield. I was taking the rear view mirror off, and all material I could find said just pull. The thing would come right off. Cracked the windshield. So that kind of sucks. So we'll need to get a new one of those. But look forward to when I test this car when I'm driving this thing open top and it's blowing right in my face. That's going to be some good content. Look out for that. And then like I said, brake flush, need to clean the car, need to wipers, spark plugs, transponder mount, need to adjust the wiring harness for the headlights, and then I need to do a setup. Probably going to do the shakedown without doing the setup first. Just because we're running down low on time, and the main thing we need to do shaking this down is to make sure there's no mechanical or electrical gremlins, the things that are going to take a significant amount of time. So I'll do the shakedown before doing the setup on it. But anyway, so that's where I'm going to leave off for today. We're in a really good place. This car is essentially alive. There's a couple things I need to button up before we can safely drive the thing, but next week we're back in the shop. Everything will be in place for me to do maybe 5 more hours of work and the car's done. Aside from a setup, which may take a little bit longer, but this car will be alive and on track early next week. So excited for that.
Now that's going to do it for this episode. Don't forget to come back for next time when some really, really cool stuff happens. We start up this car for the first time and we take it for our shakedown. So see you then.